Hi, folks. Hi, folks. Welcome to an impromptu interview with Kari Lyons from the Welcome Home Coalition. She's a housing advocate, and she is out there to support for more housing initiatives, around the region. And we're here today to talk about the midterm elections and what the local elections here in Multnomah County, metro area, state of Oregon mean in terms of housing issues right here and now. And we'll talk a little bit about the candidates. I'm going to endorse a few people, which I almost never do. And Kari cannot endorse any candidates, but she may have some other tidbits of information that she can add. And then we'll talk about the upcoming measures on the ballot, which include constitutional amendment and a regional housing bond. And we'll talk in depth about that. Thanks so much for coming.
Happy to be here.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization, why you guys are out there?
Sure. So the Welcome Home Coalition is it was formed in 2014 by 6 organizations who felt like they were advocating a lot for new revenue for affordable housing. It was in the middle of the increasing housing crisis, where we were seeing rents increasing, from 10% up to 30% sometimes, and we were beginning to see the start of sort of mass eviction in the city of Portland. In 2016, the community line tenants came along and did their emergency. So it was a period of time where homeless service providers, people that build transitional housing and affordable housing, were really feeling like we needed a group to step up and to be able to advocate for revenues. So the Welcome Home Coalition was formed, did a whole bunch of research on the best ways to bring in revenue by looking at different places around the nation, and felt like a housing bond was a great effort to bring in a large bulk of build affordable housing. So in 2016, with the support of the city of Portland, put a ballot measure on the 2016 ballot and got $258 million to build approximately 1,300 units within the city of Portland. So now we are 65 organizations strong. We're committed to being grounded in racial equity, working hard to house communities of color, immigrants and refugees, and folks that are extremely poverty. So in that housing world, that's what we call 0 to 50% median family income. In language for folk on the street, it's $24,000 for a family of 4 a year, or for one person, it's $17,000 a year. So our goal is just to continue to bring in new revenue in order to fill the affordable housing gap. Right now, we have about 36,178 homes in our region for people that are in deep poverty. So we're just going to keep working as hard as we can to bring in new revenue.
Excellent. And thank you for coming into the Priced Out podcast. I want to also show our new graphic. Right, high tech here. Yes. We're here at Northwest Documentary, our media in Northeast Portland, also known AKA as Mom's Basement. The lighting here is very erratic and out of our control, so they go on and on about beyond our control. So thanks anybody who's joining us. Kevin Dahlgren, great to hear from you. Everybody put in a comment. This is a live stream, and please interact. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Throw a virtual tomato at us. It's all welcome. So who to vote for? No one has time to do any research. No, of course you should. But I rarely run a newspaper. I work for newspapers. I never do endorsements, but I'm happy to do it today because we're very focused on housing issues, and this is what I feel strongly about in terms of that single issue focus. So governor's race, you have no position on that, right?
And I think that Kate Brown has a pretty strong housing plan when it comes to ending child homelessness. I was just trying to get some data around Clackamas County. So last year they had 410 houseless children out of 628 enrolled in Head Start. I think when we begin to really look at the fact that there are moms on the street that are using baby wipes to clean their kids up in order for them to go to school, so they're clean and fit in when they go to school, and the moms go to different spaces in order to get ready for work. I think ending child homelessness is a pretty noble goal.
important because it's rare that a governor would have a specific plan for child homelessness at the state level. Here in the metro area, if you think housing is the most important issue in the city of Portland, which many people do, it's vital that in the next legislative session there be a governor who's not going to veto any of the things that are coming down the pike, which is going to be. Although this is, we have a fly in here who's our second assistant director, and his name is Chester, and he'll be joining us later in the show. Would be lovely.
One thing I would say about measure 105 around sanctuary cities, I think we might not necessarily see the tight tie to housing, but one of the conversations we were having the other day was resident screening criteria, or when we go out and do point-in-time homeless counts, or we go and we try to look at data and getting people housed. It's getting harder and harder with immigration issues that are arising. And so I think it's important that we make sure that everybody in our community feels safe, and if 105 does go away, which I know is a point of discussion in the governor's race, you're going to see even higher concerns around immigration, and it's going to be even harder for us to ensure diversity in our region, because it's not just about people being gentrifying or displacement, it's people actually being able to safely access housing, and we won't be able to do that if we don't have sanctuary cities in place.
And in terms of the initiatives that are coming down for to the legislature around conversations around rent control and just cause eviction, getting rid of no cause eviction, all those are preemptions at the state level. The reason why you can't have rent control in Portland is because it's not allowed here in the state of Oregon, and just cause eviction is again it's a preemption at the state level, so the legislature has to fix those problems. And right now there's momentum to do just that. The obstructionists in the state legislature have been removed for the most part because of the work of activists. The primary out the chief Democratic obstructionist there, so they're probably the votes to get that very significant obstruction removed. But if the governor is a Republican, tremendous pressure on him to just be a veto machine, especially if you have a Republican governor, Newt Bueller. I think he'd be a piece for the Republican Party around the country, winning in a blue state and like Oregon, and that he'll just be there to make trouble. He'll have tremendous pressure right now under the current sort of crazy political environment we are in. So, I personally have voted for Republicans in the past, to demonstrate my nonpartisan stance. Voted for Chris Dudley, but Kate Brown, I think, is very important. It's very important she stay in office, Democrat Kate Brown. And then the other races, there's really not much to say. I mean, it's scary that so many people are running unopposed. I think it speaks to how polarized things are. It's just Democrats in some districts and Republicans in other districts, and the two aren't even running against each other. Betsy Johnson is running in the 16th State Senate district. She has also been an obstructionist to issues in the past. She may be the focus of activists in the future. That'd be interesting to see. But for the most part, the most important election here is for the open city council seat here in Portland, and that is Loretta Smith running against Joanne Hardesty, two African-American women who have a long history of activism and involvement in the community. Of course, Loretta, known for her position in the Multnomah County Commission, and the issue of Wapato, which is a very big distinction in housing between these two candidates. Wapato, we've had on past podcast discussions about the Multnomah County Jail that was never opened, sits in St. John's in far off Portland, and there is now a movement by private to turn it into a very large shelter. Loretta is for that. Joanne is against it. Do you want to tell us a little bit of context around Wapato?
Not really.
No.
I mean, I think if you research, you'll find that different homeless organizations organizations are not in support of using Wapato, because it does feel warehoused. It does feel a little bit like not my backyard, and moving folks away from some of the key essential services that they need. So I think if you just Google Wapato, you'll find a lot of opinions about it that are pretty strongly in support of not using it for a homeless shelter.
And so it's in private hands right now. Homer Williams and the Schnitzer family largely are the players in the current conversation. It's not really in front of the city to do. They don't have a decision pending in front of them about the building anymore. If it was going to be a nonprofit, it would rely on city and county contracts in order to stay in business, is what I'm assuming. And so it would come before the city and county at some point. Based on Joanne's track record as an activist, though, separate from this issue, I support Joanne, and I think that she would be good for the city. Wapato is controversial. I think there are kind of strong arguments on both sides that there needs to be a large, or at least more resources available to addressing our homeless problems. Whether Wapato is right or not, I'm actually not going to take a position on that, but I think Joanne is good. So she can vote. Now, the big one is really the big ballot initiatives here that people will see on their ballots. That just their ballots just went out today. They should be arriving in mail for most people. The pamphlet already went out last week. We vote by mail here, so you all know. And so, the first one is Measure 102, a constitutional amendment. Now that's controversial just off the bat. You know, the old Oregon adage that I know is, if you don't understand the initiative and it's a constitutional amendment, vote no. So please listen. We will explain it to you. It's quite simple. 102 allows taxpayer money raised for housing to be spent with private entities. Now, why is that important?
So I think important to know is that in the legislature, in order for this to get on the ballot for a vote, there was actual bipartisan support for it. So, you know, I think it's important for people to know that this isn't like a partisan issue, right? That changing the Constitution as far as our electeds go is a good thing when it comes to affordable housing. When it was originally passed, it was actually passed, think about bridges or trains building. It was passed around railways so that private corporations wouldn't be taking over owning railroads, right? The government would be able to own and operate them. I think what's really important with affordable housing is in order for to have a public-private partnership on dollars, have to be able to work with different types of funding. So when we build affordable housing, you have to use tax credits and all these different revenue streams, like construction excise tax, et cetera. And in order to be able to do that, we have to be able to lift the constitutional amendment so that different kinds of finance tools can work together. And what that means is that you don't just have a local housing authority owning the affordable housing. You can have a partnership with the Community Development Corporation, with nonprofits, for-profits. And I think what's invaluable about that is when you have folks like Hacienda Community Development Corporation, Native American Youth Association, a lot of these, you know, BNS Star out in Washington County, a lot of these developers of color right now don't have access to these funds in order to build housing, farm worker housing specific to communities of color. So with Measure 102, if we can vote to lift that ban, it really allows the funding to be more flexible, and it allows developers of color and nonprofits to be able to use that funding, which is really essential when it comes to building affordable housing.
So it seems like a relatively small issue, but it has a huge
impact. And I think the important thing to know is that if we do pass the next measure, we're going to talk about 2619, with the bond, we can only build, you know, about 7,500 units, or maybe it's 7,000, sorry. But if we lift the constitutional ban, we can build 12,000 units. So it's a huge difference. We see how many units we actually how many people we can actually house. Sorry, I said units, but I actually meant 12,000 people housed. It's about 1,000 units versus about 7,500, 8,000 folks housed. It's a huge difference in we're talking like 3,000-4,000 individuals being housed versus not being housed. And I think that's really important when we look at what's happening on our streets.
So if we remove this ban on mingling public and private funds, and spending public funds with private developers, if we pass a big regional housing bond, the effect of that bond will be amplified manyfold. Yeah. Manyfold.
Yeah.
And certainly support that. Now there's really no, in the voters pamphlet, if you go through your voters pamphlet, there's only one argument in opposition to this initiative, and that is from Alan Olson. Good for you. Nothing should go unopposed at all. And he basically says, other than you're going to be spending public tax dollars, his tax dollars with private developers, and that's one objection. But I'm sorry, that's been happening since before you were born. Basically says there's no definition for what affordable housing is in this measure, and that's his argument. So I don't know if you want to address that, but it's just that's the other.
Well, there is a traditional definition for affordable housing, with the housing urban development. It might not be clear in the specific measure, but I think most of the folks that are involved in the affordable housing industry development know what that definition is.
And we'll get into that in the next issue, which is Metro Bond 26199, which is Beachball Bond metro area, 3-county area, 26 towns, Portland included, surrounding metro area here in the Oregon side of the river. This is a bond that, if it passed, would raise $652.8 million for affordable housing to produce sustained subsidized affordable housing. And affordable housing here is defined as 80% of the metro median income, MMI, for example, people who earn 80% or less of the median family income, which would be for a family of four, $65,000 a year. So to help those folks and people who earn less into affordable, sustainable rentals, and that's going to raise money through property tax that would put 24 cents into this fund for every $1,000 of assessed value
which is approximately $50 to $60 per household per year.
Right.
It's about $5 a month.
That's what they say, $5 a month. And so,
so I think first of all, I think we have to acknowledge that this is rad that this is happening in our region. I mean, and this is metropolitan, so it's Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah County. So I think it's important to know that the money is going to go out percentage by population. So it's about 25% Clackamas County, 35% Washington, 45% Multnomah County. I think there's a cost of doing nothing, which is housing bonds are really the only tool for us bringing in massive amounts of money to build affordable housing. If this does not pass, which we all confidently faith that it will, because to think about not housing 12,000 people really is unthinkable. I have all these stories in my head. It's hard to not talk about them because when we're talking about a policy, we're talking about human beings, right? So the Welcome Home Coalition is based out of Join's data space. And a couple of weeks ago, I was walking up to go into work, and there was a woman sitting outside, and she looked a little dazed and confused. And so I walked past her, and I thought again and came back and said, "Are you cool? Is everything all right?" And she said, "Well, here's the thing. I've never had to walk into a homeless shelter before, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do."
And that's what Join.
That's what Join does, yeah, right? So they, folks come in and they get their mail there, et cetera, et cetera. So I just think like Join houses about 1,000 people a year, and so I think when you think about folks that come into the day shelter, the families that come in, that the moms and dads, their kids are at school, we have to think about this policy first and foremost as like human beings that are living on the street, kids that are living on the street, going to school and coming back and taking in a car. I think first, and that's the most important thing to know. The second is this is the best way for us to get lots of money to solve this problem. What's great about it is 41% of the dollars will go to folks in deep, deep poverty. So that's 0 to 40% median family income. That's going back to that, $17,000 per individual per year, or $24,000 per family of four, right? So that's a large group of people that are currently living on the street. They're overcrowded, they're doubled up, etc., being able to be housed. The second thing is a lot of the money is going to 3, 4, and 5 bedroom size units.
Mm-hmm.
So we've heard of family size units, and we've heard a lot from immigrant and refugee communities that, you've got intergenerational living, you've got families getting a 1 bedroom unit, single SROs, what they called, and they're all living in one room together, or grandma sleeping on the couch. So family size units is huge. About 50% of it will be properties that will be acquired, 50% be construction. I think what's really great about that is we're increasing our housing supply, which is exactly what we need to do. And there was I was a part of the group, and I give hats off to Metro, because they are way ahead of the game when it comes to being ready and prepared for dollars to go out the door. They have a framework that's really founded in racial equity. It's really intended on ensuring that communities of color are housed, that communities of color who are in deep poverty are housed. We're doing it allowing transportation investments. And I know the Welcome Home Coalition and other folks are really there to serve in accountability and oversight. So I'm pretty stoked about the fact that, if you can fill out your ballot measure as a no for that, and confidently tell me that when you see our numbers of houselessness going up, you didn't play a role in that, it's hard for me to make that relationship that you voting no doesn't equate to the fact that we have a huge amount of money that we could bring into our region, and people are deciding not to do that.
And the arguments in the pamphlet against, John Charles, there's only 3 arguments against it. John Charles is a libertarian Cascade Policy Institute, who is always good for a soundbite. He's going to say, he says, obviously don't raise my taxes. To that, looking at these policies across the country, an argument that you need free solutions to solve a housing crisis, and the other being you need regulation and subsidies and government spending, tax and spend. In my view, all these issues all across the country, is you can basically do both. You can do everything in the kitchen sink, and it's not going to solve the housing crisis. Every little bit helps, and I don't see why a libertarian needs to oppose sort of a tax and spend solution. They should just focus on free solutions. They don't have to oppose other solutions. So I really think that everyone just keep positive and just throw everything that we can at this problem, and we might take a chunk out of it.
I think something that we haven't talked about a lot is just in general around housing is what the number of jobs that this could actually provide. And doing some rough math, the construction industry ebbs and flows based on, we had a school line come in, working on hotels or the convention center. Those projects will begin to fade. And then we'll have construction workers that need jobs. And a rough estimate is between 2,500 and 3,000 jobs in the construction industry could develop as a result of this funding. So I think we think about it as we're not just housing people, but we're also impacting our local economy and ensuring people have jobs.
And the one caveat that John Charles will bring up, and that other people bring up, and that's a fair concern, is that the cost of building an affordable unit is very high in Portland. It can be $250,000. It can be up to $500,000 to build a single unit. There are developers, free market folks, who can develop a unit for half that cost. But passing the constitutional amendment that would allow public dollars to be spent with private developers may help to reduce some of those costs. So everybody gets a little something. It's a win-win. Is there anything else that you would like to talk to on this issue? This is going to be a short podcast.
Well, I think what I'd say is that when we bring in new dollars, there's a couple of things. A lot of folks say that this is not a silver bullet, and I think that is important. We need to remember, we're still going to have to when this is all done. We're not going to end street homelessness this. We shouldn't have a perception that we're all of a sudden going to get everybody off the street in the US. So one of the things I think it's important to know is that like we have a collective responsibility to the issue, not just with the ballot in front of us, but beyond that. You know, when we look at like mental health and addiction services, and we need money for support services for people that have mental health and addiction issues that are living on the street. Some of that money will go with these dollars and will build what's called permanent supportive housing, right? So you've got a unit that has services, intensive services for folks that have severe disabilities. But there's a whole housing continuum here, whether it's low-income home ownership, and home ownership is off the table if Measure 102 doesn't pass. If we pass Measure 102, you've got low-income home ownership, and that is wealth creation, that is, you know, building equity. And for, you know, some families of color that are living in affordable housing right now, we are watching folks in Bienestar move from affordable housing to home ownership. That's a huge deal, you know, to promote that kind of wealth creation and equity. When we look at permits for housing and transitional housing, we're just going to keep needing to bring in new revenue. So vote yes, no, and, you know, continue to be involved and have collective responsibility. I think sometimes we can have a limited tolerance. Like, I voted yes, why didn't homelessness go away or homelessness go away? Like, let's have a tolerance around the fact that, like, you know, anti-displacement work, getting more folks off of the street and getting children housed, making sure that the impact of trauma on the street are being cared for by healthcare and that they're having successful educational outcomes. It takes a collective responsibility, a collective impact over 3, 4, or 5 years as a community. And I think we need to be really mindful of those of us who are in a place of privilege, especially in white privilege. We need to be really mindful of the judgments that we're making about whether people are being housed and who's being housed and how we're tackling the issue, because this is a long-term issue, and we need, especially from a place of privilege, we need to stay committed to solving the problem and moving forward together.
Thank you very much, Kari Lyons of the Local Home Coalition. Yep, I got it. Yep, you got it.